Okay, let's dive into this. It's one thing to say someone had a miraculous, unprecedented entry into the world, right? But it's an entirely different level to claim that they then went on to live a completely flawless, untarnished life from start to finish. I mean, that is a staggering claim. Think about it. Human nature is universally understood to be flawed. We all make mistakes. So, what does it actually mean when the ancient texts claim someone just bypassed that completely? Well, that's the overarching mystery we're unpacking today.
In Surah 19, verse 19, the angel is speaking to Mary, delivering the news of what's about to happen. The messenger says, "I am only a messenger of thy Lord, that I may bestow on thee a faultless son." Now, notice the specific adjective used here. The angel doesn't just say a blessed son or a great son. The text specifically declares that Mary will bear a son with a completely pure, unmixed record from the very beginning.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer depth of the claim. The specific Arabic word used in that verse is zakiya. It plainly translates to pure and faultless. So the text is establishing his absolute purity before he even takes a single breath. We aren't just talking about a mostly good record where, the good outweighs the bad. We're talking about a state of being perfectly clean and untainted, stated plainly right at the literal starting line of his life.
Now, to be thorough and intellectually honest with our source material, because Jesus actually isn't the only one described with purity in this specific chapter. If you look just a few verses earlier at Surah 19, verse 13, the text says, "In compassion from our presence, and purity, and he was devout." This verse is actually describing John the Baptist. He's granted compassion and purity from birth. Now, you might be wondering, does this somehow dilute the claim about Jesus? Actually, no. As you'll see, this is a purposeful connection, not just some historical coincidence. So, the crucial point is how this all connects. John's purity wasn't random. The Gospel of Luke tells us John operated in the spirit and power of Elijah. He was fulfilling a centuries-old ancient prophecy of the forerunner who would arrive right before the Messiah. And this role wasn't just a rumor. It was explicitly confirmed by Jesus himself. Therefore, John's purity was tied directly to one specific divine job, preparing the way for the Messiah. It was functional, purposeful purity, meant to herald the arrival of someone even greater.
We're moving from a declarative birth announcement made in private to a tested, purposeful purity actively lived out during Jesus' public ministry. Let's set the scene here. It's years into his public ministry. Jesus is surrounded by fierce religious critics, authorities who watched his every single move, analyzed his every word, and had literally every possible motivation to discredit him. And in the middle of this intense scrutiny, he issues this audacious public dare. As recorded in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 46, he looks directly at them and asks, "Which one of you convicts me of sin?" He challenged them to point out one instance where he fell short. And what happened? By every historical account we have of this moment, they were silent. The challenge went entirely unanswered.
Let's move and see how this builds into an even larger picture. We're planting a critical narrative thread here that ties his public sinlessness back to ancient prophecy.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the incredible parallel it reveals. On the left, we have the ancient prophet Isaiah in the Old Testament describing a coming suffering servant. Isaiah writes, "Although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth." Now look at the right side. Centuries later, the Apostle Peter uses nearly identical words to describe Jesus in action. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. This is absolutely not an accident. Peter is deliberately matching Jesus to the prophetic profile of Isaiah's suffering servant. This shows us that his sinlessness wasn't just a neat character trait. It was a foundational piece of a highly specific, ancient prophetic profile that he was fulfilling to the letter.
So, let's bring all of this together. The texts present a remarkable unified picture. He was called pure and faultless before he was even born. He stood before his fiercest, most motivated critics, publicly daring them to find a single flaw in his life, and he was met with total silence. And his earliest followers immediately recognized that this absolute purity perfectly matched the ancient prophetic profile of the suffering servant. That is the awe-inspiring mystery of his sinlessness. But it leaves us with a massive provocative question. If someone actually possessed that kind of absolute, spotless authority on earth, what did he actually do with it? How did he wield power that pure? Well, we're going to explore exactly that in our next explainer when we dive into his miracles. You absolutely won't want to miss it.